Now in section 4.1, we're going to cover rounding and estimation. Now let's first try to understand what exactly rounding means. So we're going to think about what rounding to the tens place means. So let's just mark the number line. Let's say that's a 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. Now, let's say we have a number 23. Now, if this is the midway between 20 and 30, 23 lies, this is like a 25, 23 lies slightly to the left of 25. It is closer to 20 than it is to 30. So if we are counting in tens, and we want to round 23 to the tens place, then the nearest 10 is a 20. So 23 is rounded to 20. Now suppose we have a 37. The midway would be a 35. 37 would be to the right of it, which means 37 lies between 30 and 40, but it's closer to 40 than it is to 30. So if we want to round 37 to the tens place, which means we are going to count in tens, then 37 would approximately be rounded to 40. So that's what really rounding to the tens place means. Now suppose we follow a process. You probably have done this before. If I say round to the tens place, okay, so we're going to round to the tens place. First, identify the tens place. This is the ones and this is the tens. So underline that. That's your tens place. Look one place value to the right. This number here is going to tell us whether to round up or round down. Now 3 is less than 5. If it's less than 5, then we round down, which means we leave the 2 alone. The 3 becomes a 0 because we don't really care about the ones place because we are rounding it to the tens. So when rounded to the tens place, 23 becomes a 20. Now let's see 37. We want to round it to the tens place. First, identify the tens place. It's one place to the left of the ones place, and that's your tens place. Now we go and look at one place value to the right. Now that number is going to tell us whether to round up or round down. Now 7 is greater than 5. So therefore, that tells us that we need to round up, which means we add 1. So the 7 becomes a 0 because we don't care about the ones place because we're counting in tens. And the 3 becomes a 4. So 37, when rounded to the tens place, is a 40. Now what if we had a 35? And we want to round it to the tens place. First, identify the tens place. Look one place value to the right. That number is going to help us decide whether to round up or round down. So 5 and above, we round up, which means we have to add 1 to the tens place. That number becomes, the ones place becomes a 0. So we round up to a 40. Now, rounding up means adding a 1 to the tens place, like we did in the second and third example. It's called rounding up because 37 is rounded to 40, which is greater than 37. That's why we call it rounding up. 35, when rounded, becomes a 40, which is greater than 35. That's why it's called rounding up. Now, in the case of 23, when rounded to the tens place, is equal to 20, which is less than 23. So that's why it's called rounding down. So in rounding down, notice that 2 remains 2. You do not subtract 1, just leave it alone. Now, suppose we want to round to the thousands place. Identify the thousands place first. That's your hundreds, and this is your thousands place. Look, 1 place value to the right. So the first 7 from the right is in the thousands place. 1 place value to the right is a 9. 9 tells us to round up, which means we're going to add a 1 to 7. Every digit after the 7 becomes a 0 because we are rounding to the thousands place. You have to have at least 3 zeros at the end. We're rounding up, so 7 plus 1 is 8. Every other digit remains the same. So we have 3,378,000 when we round it to the thousands place. Now we have to round it to the millions place. So first locate the millions place. That's ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. Look, 1 place value to the right. 3 is less than 5, so we round down, which means we leave the millions place 3 alone, and everything else becomes a 0. So 3,377,959 is approximately equal to 3 million when you round it to the millions place. And it's been rounded down because 3 million is less than 3,377,959. Let's start again. We round it to the hundreds place. This is the hundreds place. 1 place value to the right, it's a 5. If it's a 5 or above, we round up, which means we add a 1 to the hundreds place. Everything else becomes a 0 after that. So 2 zeros at the end because we are rounding up to the hundreds. We're rounding to the hundreds place. 9 plus 1 is 10. 7 plus 1 is 8. Remember, just add a 1 and whatever happens, you need to just do the usual addition. So it's 3,378,000. Make sure if it's in the hundreds place, the last 2 are zeros. Adding a 1 to 9 made it a 10. We carried the 1 over, and that's how you get the 3,378,000. Now the tens place. 5 is in the tens place. 1 place value to the right tells us to round up, which means add a 1 to 5. The 9 becomes 0. The 5 becomes a 6. There is no carrying over. And it's 377. So it's 3,377,960. It says estimate the sum by first rounding each number. Now when we use calculators, obviously if you use it correctly, enter the numbers correctly, we get the right answer. But when we use calculators, we need to make sure we have a rough idea of what the answer looks like. So that way, if we did not enter the numbers correctly, at least we know that there is an error. So we have to have an estimate before we look at the answer on the calculator. So if we round each number to the thousands place, remember that's the thousands place. First number is rounded up. So we're going to add 1 to the 5. It becomes 6,000. We round down. The 1 remains a 1. There's no subtraction at all. in rounding. And when you round 1304, it becomes 1,000. Now 5 is in the thousands place. One place value to the right tells us to round down, which means leave the 5 alone. Add all these numbers. That's pretty quick. It's 102,000. So roughly we are expecting an answer around 102,000. Now let's see. 9 plus 4 is 13, plus 3 is 16. 7 plus 1 is 8, 8 plus 2 is 10. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Carry the 1, 5, 6, 7. 7 plus 5 is 12. 9 plus 1 is 10. So it's 102,106. So if we enter this into calculator and get an answer, then we know that at least it's not completely incorrect, because our estimate says it should be 102,000. Let me just double check. Make sure I've added the numbers correctly. 9 plus 4, 13, 16, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6 plus 1 is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 10 plus 2, 12, and 10. So that's correct. Now let's do the last one. When we have to do subtraction and addition, then what we do is go from left to right. Whatever comes first, we have to do that first. 4208 minus, and line up the place values. 9 is in the hundreds place, 3 in the tens, 2 in the ones. We subtract. 8 minus 2 is 6. We have to borrow a 1. So 10 minus 3 is 7. That becomes a 1 because we borrowed a 1. Now 1 minus 9 is not possible. We borrow a 1 from here, and that becomes 11. 9 plus 2 is 11. And then we have a 3,276. Now 3,276 plus 1,294. We're adding, so line up the place values. 6 plus 4 is 10. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 7 is 17. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 3 plus 1 is 4. So our answer is 4,570. Now let's check if we can round and figure out an estimate. 4,208 is roughly equal to 4,000. If we round it to the thousands place, 2 tells us to round down. 932, when rounded to the thousands place, remember there's a 0 right now, but if we look to the right, it tells us to add 1. Everything else becomes a 0, so that's equal to 1,000 plus thousands place, 2 tells us to round down, that's 1,000. So roughly your answer has to be a 4,000 minus 1,000, which is 3,000 plus 1,000, which is a 4,000. And our answer is 4,570.